Picture this. Tragic, tragic childhood with just a horrific home life. Bounced around from foster home to foster home. Found some solace in the state capitol where he was mentored by lawmakers and he learned how the government worked. A rosy future ahead of him. Got married. Announced tragically that he had cancer. And his obituary hit the newspaper and rocked his community. But the story doesn't end there. Because he's back from the grave. He was never dead. He never had cancer. And he's an absolute con artist. He faked his death and fled the United States to avoid charges of the big R word. And he nearly succeeded. He's smart. He would change his name. He went to 2 different countries. He had disguises. Because of a new law and a dogged attorney general from a small county, he has been extradited back to the US and he's now sitting in county jail awaiting trial for 2 cases of the R word. This is the case of Nicholas Alahverdian, also known as Nicholas Rossi. This is a wild case, and when I first heard about it, Nicholas Rossi, it was on the behavior panel when he was purporting to be Arthur Knight of Scotland, an orphan who was not American. He has no idea who this Nicholas Rossi person is. And it was just a bizarre case of this guy clearly lying through his teeth, wearing a bizarre disguise, these big glasses, and he had this oxygen mask on, obscuring his face, trying to obscure his identity, clearly. That was where I first heard about him. I had no idea that it had a local connection. So here's the wild story of Nicholas Rossi. He was born Nicholas Alahverdian. He originally grew up in Rhode Island. Again, he did have a very horrible childhood, a schmoozive one, as we say, to keep things platform friendly. He was in the foster system quite a lot. His stepfather was David Rossi, so he took on his stepfather's last name. That's where the Rossi comes in. Stepfather said that he wouldn't listen in school. He hit his mother, his grandmother, hit his siblings. The stepfather had to hold him down, and then Nicholas would be spitting at him. At one point as a teenager, he was admitted into a psychiatric hospital where he was diagnosed with narcissistic personality disorder and potentially several other things. It's a little hard to diagnose until you're fully an adult, but this kid was clearly not well. So he was in the foster system in his teens, what they call the night-to-night program, which meant he would be sometimes in a different foster home from one night to the next, not necessarily knowing where he would be going. I don't know tons about that program, but it doesn't sound exactly conducive to a stable upbringing for a teenager. So by 2014, he was around 16 or 17 years old. He was working in the state capital of Rhode Island, and there was a state representative who considered adopting him. He actually went there and said, "Would you adopt me, please?" And the guy at first was like, well, there's a possibility. This poor kid, he's a hard worker. But there was a family judge who knew the case, who knew the history, and I don't think he could say much that wasn't on the public record, so he couldn't divulge, confidential information. Because Nicholas had this huge temper, was known to be incredibly violent, and he was a compulsive liar. But he did say, don't do it. Don't adopt this kid. That he will, quote, try to undermine you and turn your family upside down. Don't adopt this kid. So the representative took that advice, did not adopt him. Eventually, he aged out of the system, but he remained involved in the state level legislature, in theory, trying to get reform in the foster system, which is commendable, and I'm sure every state foster system could use some improvement. We have issues. Nicholas claimed that he was sent away to Nebraska, and then the foster system prohibited him from contacting anyone while he was there. Not sure how any of this is possible. I believe he was lying through his teeth again, because I don't think the foster systems in the U.S. are federal. They're on the state level, I believe. You could correct me. If you don't know how this works, let me know. He said he was prohibited from contacting anyone. Beating, supposedly, he was getting in his foster homes. wasn't allowed to even talk to DCFS. He goes to college in Ohio. He's at Sinclair Community College. Early 2008, he meets this female student, and he offers to walk her to her next class after lunch. They had lunch together, and she's like, well, that's fine, I guess. They end up in a stairwell where he pins her against a wall and does things to her that he shouldn't be doing. And when she protests, he says, I'm almost done. Don't be a bee. He later apologized, saying that he, quote, couldn't help it because she was, quote, beautiful and not to tell anybody. She made a police report. He was convicted of public indecency and sexual imposition, and he was required to register as an S offender. However, he had been in the legislature long enough on the state level to know how some of the laws work. So he filed a motion for retrial based on supposedly a newly surfaced MySpace post. This is that long ago. Supposedly written by the victim, claiming that she had lied. And then they did some digging, discovered that no, that actually he had invented the post. It was fabricated. So a motion for a new trial was denied. But yeah, he then was tried to sue her because the life-altering false accusations, blah, blah, blah. He was trying to drag her and her name through the mud. The result of the court case against her found to be without merit, but that was 2014, 6 years after the event. He dragged this out. And the same year, he wrote an essay. This shows his mentality, guys. Okay. He entitled it, My Personal 9/11. That this girl had ruined his life, of being his goals and aspirations. And he compared himself to the victims of the 9/11 attacks.
What?
Stop.
After 2008, he had another incident in 2010 where there was a girl, he took her cell phone, stopped her from leaving his apartment, saying, if you leave, I will off myself, asked her to sit on his lap and then make out with him. She screams, and then he lets her go. She reports this to the police, and then he then says, well, I'm having a rough time. I'm being treated for depression. So they sent him in for a psychological evaluation. Married in November of that year, the very next month, a woman files a police report saying that she had dinner with him. This was not his wife. She visited his apartment, was constantly rejecting his requests for what. And she said that he kept stopping her from leaving and forced her to pay him $200 to leave and declare on video that, quote, she could not pursue legal action and that the money she gave him was for therapy due to her violent actions and her sexual addiction. So by 2011 in May, his first marriage ends in divorce. So they were married from November to May. So that's great. 4 years later, he's married again. This is where we start seeing more of the LDS stuff, which is, pisses me off. He apparently gets baptized, joins the church in the same way, I believe, that Ted Bundy did. Just because he gets people who are trusting and believe that if you're converted, that you've made promises to be honest and truthful and do good things, that you can be trusted. Those people make great victims, great marks. So he goes to a singles dance put on by the church, and he meets this girl. And she is feeling all of those cultural pressures to get married and have kids and all of that. And she's like, well, I'm not really attracted to him, and there are some red flags, but I'm supposed to marry. Okay, so listen, ladies, red flags. She alleges that he nearly offed her more than once and still married him because it was the way she would have the life she thought that she wanted with the church stuff. Ladies, it is far better to be alone than with someone like that. It is far better to never be a mother than to have your life in that kind of jeopardy and be with someone. No. Guys, cultural expectations, let's knock it off. So she starts reporting his behavior, his toward her, beginning the day after the wedding. He threatens her with a knife. He threatens to off himself. He isolates her, all of the classic tactics, keeping her in the house away from everybody. Eventually, He's ordered to pay her $7,000 as part of a divorce settlement. Instead of paying her a dime, he goes back to Rhode Island. This is where things get interesting. Back up, we're going to go back to Utah for a little bit. I'm not sure when he was in Utah before this. It might have been where he met his second wife. I'm not sure. But we know he had 2 ex-girlfriends in Utah. And those are 2 people that he is accused of R-ing and is going to be on trial for both of those. So in 2015, there was a push to get the Utah kids tested. In 2017, that's when the law was passed saying that they had to be tested. By 2020, the backlog was completely gone, and Utah became only the 8th state to get rid of the entire backlog. So yay, Utah on that one. There's enough bad news coming sometimes that it's nice when there's a positive. So according to the Deseret News, I believe as of 2020, over 11,000 kits had been analyzed. More than 5,000 new DNA profiles have been uploaded into the DNA database, and almost 2,000 suspects identified. That is fantastic. And lo and behold, there's a hit from the case in Ohio going back to 2008. The DNA from a case in Utah matched the DNA from that case in Ohio. Good thing she reported it to the police because they were able to say this is the same dude. He had a girlfriend, an ex-girlfriend in Utah who supposedly he owed money to, and he went to her house in Orem, which is about an hour south of Salt Lake, to get the money, and instead he assaulted her. One report in the document said that he exposed himself, R-ed her, and then accused her of being, quote, mentally unstable and too emotional. After the attack, he attempted to prevent her from leaving, requiring her to escape when he was distracted. The other cases reported showing a consistent pattern of behavior, according to a Utah investigator, where he was accused of starting, quote, inappropriate contact. He would threaten or force a non-consensual sexual encounter, and later tell the police that the female was the aggressor. Class act. So then in July of 2022, the Office of the Salt Lake County District Attorney filed charges against him for a first-degree sexual assault and issued a no-bail warrant for his arrest. So that affidavit alleges that after a fight with the victim in 2008, the same year as the initial one in Ohio, that he would not leave his girl's bedroom, ultimately throwing her into the bed and then R-ing her. By 2019, he has claimed to have moved to Canada. Probably not. They think he might have already skipped town to try to go to Ireland by that point. He was trying to evade the police already. By 2020, he is telling people that he has heart disease, he's having all these heart attacks, and he's dying of cancer now. He has late-stage non-Hodgkin lymphoma. Oh my goodness. And supposedly then, he died on Leap Day, because of course he's special enough to die on a day that only happens once every 4 years. And his supposed widow said that he would be cremated and his remains scattered at sea. But she refused to provide a copy of the death certificate to the media when people started asking questions. Nicholas's one of his former foster mothers, named Sharon, said that his biological mother had contacted her in July of 2020, asking what's going on here. And then she read some of the comments of praise that were in his obituary, and like his mother was like, "This sounds like my son's actual writing, his own voice." Like, well, did he write this before his death, or what's going on? Then there was a lawyer who's expressing doubts, named Jeffrey Pine, that maybe he hasn't even passed at all. What's going on? The announcements of his illness and death came really quickly after the FBI investigation began against him. So that seems really interesting and red flaggy. His purported widow again denied that he'd faked his death, saying that he died in her presence. Now, several months after his supposed death, Father Bernard Healy, Our Lady of Mercy Church in East Greenwich in the U.S., received a request for a funeral mass from a woman claiming to be his widow. So at this point, he's thinking, okay, well, it's a funeral. I can do as a member of the clergy to help a grieving family. He's making arrangements, But then he is contacted by a police detective, a state police detective, Connor O'Donnell, who says, cancel the mass. This guy is not dead. He faked his death, and he's a fugitive from justice. His father, Healy, later said that the woman he spoke to on the phone sounded like Hyacinth the Bucket, who was a character from this English TV show. This little high-pitched woman's accent. And so some people have suspected it was Nicholas himself using a voice disguiser and putting on an accent. Others think it was the woman he's currently calling his wife. I'm not sure if we know they're even actually married or not. A voice expert later said that the woman claiming to be, quote, Louise is his supposed current wife, Meredith. Don't know that we know for sure. Oh, he goes to Ireland for a while, where he starts scamming people as a marketing consultant, but getting paid until they finally realize they're not getting their money's worth. He's not doing anything, and they fire him, and he's, of course, pissed off about that. Then he goes to Scotland, again, because the people are on his tail, and he's trying to hide his tracks, and he does that pretty well. And now he's going by Arthur Knight. He's gone through a couple of aliases by this point, and he's claiming that he has lung problems, and seizures, and all of this stuff.
But I can't, because I can't breathe. I can't walk. People say that's an act. Let me try to stand up. Let me try to stand up. Exactly. Exactly. So
when Arthur fell back into his chair, it was hard not to wonder, was it all an act?
Uh-oh.
Stand up. Exactly.
By 2022, we're getting more and more police reports coming forward from Massachusetts, Rhode Island, Ohio, Utah, involving criminal cases of sexual assault, harassment, possible kidnapping, ranging from 2007 all the way to 2019. This guy was a busy criminal, allegedly. Yikes. He's been accused of faking COVID to get into the hospital, so that's he can hide out there for a while. This is August 9th, I believe, of 2020. They're like, you're in great shape. You can go home. They didn't see any problems with his lungs or seizures or anything else. He was pissed, did not want to go, because obviously then he could be tracked down more easily, right? He attacked the staff, jumped out of bed and ran at them. So this guy who's supposedly frail and on death's door is apparently strong enough to jump out of a hospital bed and attack the hospital staff. He was convicted of threatening the hospital staff and fined 400 pounds. Then later the sheriff said that his claims that he couldn't stand were not credible. When he appeared at those court hearings, he was wearing his black robe and a kippah, as if he'd claimed he had converted to Judaism. One more conversion that was also probably just another lie. So he's in the hospital, and he actually put the address on the intake form where he was actually staying. And at this point, the FBI and David Leavitt, the Attorney General of Utah County, were tracing him. And it was thanks to that address on that form they were able to find where he was staying.
Game over.
But of course, he denies that everything, that this isn't me. They say, what about those tattoos on your arms? They're just like Nicholas Rossi's. And he says, oh, when I was in a coma in the hospital, they put tattoos on me. David Leavitt from Utah paid people to come in and put these tattoos on my arms to frame me. Really? Nicholas was in the hospital in his coma. Here's a photograph that they shared of Nicholas in his coma. The poor man. Here's what the behavioral panel had to say about it.
When's the last time you saw somebody who was in a coma wearing glasses? What do you need glasses for? I wear glasses. I've never been in a coma, but I don't think I'm going to need them if I'm in a coma. Think about that. You've got to be kidding me. And then neither one of them said, you know what? We can't show that picture. Why? Because I'm wearing my glasses. Oh, yeah.
It's ridiculous. But even so, he was still contesting, I'm Arthur Knight. I'm Arthur Knight. One more clip from the behavior panel on this one because it's just too funny. This is from Mark, who is English, on Nicholas's lovely accent.
But here's where it really falls up or falls down or goes in an odd direction for me. is he tries out his Dublin accent throughout this. He tries out his Irish accent. You can spot it in. He says, "That's all I was told," but he says, "That's all I was told." So he's trying to get this. He's testing out. Could he play the Irish?
Now here's where it gets interesting. As the child of a linguist, I find this fascinating. And yeah, Nicholas didn't take this part into account. Duh.
Now, of course, if he was born in Dublin, but then he grew up and had a terrible childhood in Northern Ireland, everybody would know. Southern Ireland isn't Northern Ireland, and the Irish accent is very, very different in Northern Ireland. Nothing like the Dublin accent. So I don't know where he had this terrible childhood in Northern Ireland, but didn't pick up the Northern Irish accent instead of this Dublin accent, which he's testing out at this point.
After a battle in Scottish court, a judge ruled Rossi to be a quote, dishonest and deceitful as he is evasive and manipulative. But his fingerprints matched those of Nicholas Rossi in America. And that is finally then, without having to wait for a DNA test, the judge in Scotland said, "I declare that you are Nicholas Rossi and you are now going to go back to the United States to face those charges." And then 2 months later, October of 2023, a second judge confirmed that decision. To January of 2024, he is extradited back to the States, where he is facing charges initially in Utah. He continues to claim that he is Arthur Knight as he's sitting in the Utah County Jail. He'd been there about 8 months or so. Between August and October of 2024, he finally admitted in court that he is Nicholas Rossi, but he said he had to pretend to be Arthur Knight for the safety of himself and his family. But he won't say who was threatening his safety, because of course not. Nobody was threatening him. But he said there were credible threats against my life. And he says that, those threats stem from his previous work in child services in Rhode Island, but, he won't say who's making the threats. He's clearly considered a flight risk. The original warrant said $250,000. The defense asked for it to be lowered to $10,000. Instead, the judge upped it to $350,000 because he's such a big flight risk. He's able to get fraudulent documents that would let him flee the country and get into other countries. Now, Meredith, his wife, we think, potentially wife number 3, she is from the UK. She is suspected of knowing what he's doing and abetting him, especially that whole voicemail about the memorial and all of that. At this point, there isn't enough evidence, I don't believe, to arrest or convict her of anything. She has not been charged with anything, but her name is Miranda or Meredith. I've seen both, but her last name is Knight, which is where he probably got the Knight from when he's doing Arthur Knight. That, I'm sure, as someone who is a narcissist, and he has been diagnosed as one, wants to see himself as a knight in shining armor. He's one of the good guys, so of course, being Knight, he would call himself that. Okay, so now we are in 2025, and things are heating up, and the wheels of justice are moving. As of January 7th of 2025, he has the 2 different trials coming up. The first one will be the Utah County trial. It will be held in Provo. That is where the county courthouse is. It is the city right next to Orem, and that's where Brigham Young University is and all of that. On January 7th of 2025, he rejected a plea deal that he had been offered at close to the end of 2024, so a week or so prior. We do not know what the details were of that plea deal, but he rejected it regardless, so the trial will go forward in September. Currently, last I heard, it is slated to begin 15th of September of 2025. Since being returned to Utah, he has claimed all kinds of reasons for failing to show up in court, health reasons of one reason or another, so he does this whole Zoom thing. The judge at one point was like, "I expect you to be in court next time." So he's really annoyed by that. And so he says, "You will be transported to court for the pretrial hearing in March." So we'll see what happens with that. Now, the Salt Lake County, that trial is slated to begin earlier. So it seemed like the Utah County one would be tried first. He's being held in the Utah County jail, but it looks like the Salt Lake County one, those dates are moving quicker. Don't know why. So at that point, right now, the trial is slated for April, jury selection to begin April 21st, and the trial to begin the next day. They expect the whole thing to last about a week, 5 days. So 4 days of trial, 1 of jury selection. So if you've been following me, you probably remember that Corey Richens, who is the young mom who is accused of poisoning her husband and then writing the children's book about grief to help her boys get over his death that she is alleged to have caused, her jury selection also begins in Utah on April 21st. Her case was being held in Summit County. We have yet to hear for sure where the jury will be coming from, but potentially we could have a Salt Lake County jury going to both Corey's trial and Nicholas Rossi's trial. That could be interesting, but both trials will be happening at the same time. Let me know if you want me to cover them both. I will do my best. Let me know what you think about this one. Nicholas Rossi is just such a bizarre case. Seriously, go watch his interviews. They're just bonkers wild that he thought he could get away with this. But the other scary thing is he did. He got away. He was allegedly committing these kinds of crimes for 12, 13 years before he started to flee and left the country and tried to hide out and successfully did for a few years. So yay in 2008 for that victim to come forward to the police, because it was that case, that rape kit, that R kit, that was then compared to the one in Utah, the Orem case. Once the kits were being processed here in Utah, they finally connected him, found him, brought him back, and now he will face justice. So, Alahverdian. This is one of those I'm excited to keep watching. It's nice when someone who was that arrogant has their comeuppance in life. Sometimes justice wins. So let me know again what you think about this one. Give the video a like, follow if you're new, subscribe, hit the notification bell, all that stuff. In the comments again, let me know what you think. While you're down there, drop some chocolate emojis or whatever your comfort food of choice is. And until next time, pass the chocolate.